Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Phase 2 webinar, Personalization, How an Experimentation Mindset is Key to Success. My name is Chris Jorgensen, and I'm excited to turn things over to today's presenter, Annie Stone, in just a few moments to get us started. In a recent study commissioned by MasterCard and fielded by Harvard Business Review, 90% of business executives agreed that customers expect organizations to know their interests and anticipate their needs. Yet only 54% of those same leaders say their organizations are placing a high priority on investing in personalization tactics. Marketers today are feeling incredible pressure to get a personalization program started, but simultaneously feel paralyzed by the lack of resources or data needed to formulate a strategy. Over the next hour, we'll walk you through a proven methodology that starts with simple tests and builds your personalization strategy as an iterative series of experiments. For those of you who might not know us, Phase 2 is a proven partner in advancing the digital landscape, evident by 20 years of experience, trailblazing work, and a culture of constant invention. Experts in the complete digital experience, our team provides services including research and insights, strategy and design, and engineering expertise for building digital platforms. Today's presenter is Annie Stone. Annie is a marketing strategist with over 10 years of experience working across a diverse set of marketing functions. She uses her pragmatism, curiosity, and creativity to develop data-driven and innovative marketing strategies for our clients. Annie helps marketing teams create and optimize holistic strategies that provide the key processes and data they need to drive meaningful results, actionable insights, and real business impact. The optimization and insights team Annie collaborates with here at Phase 2 focuses on 3 areas of specialty: marketing technology, personalization, and data and analytics. Annie, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So today I want to talk about how to get a personalization program going without getting hung up on the various components of a MarTech stack or data that you may not have figured out yet. So I'll also be talking about how approaching a personalization strategy with an experimentation mindset will help you ensure your strategy will be impactful to your top-line business goals. And finally, we're going to talk about how to jumpstart your strategy by framing it as a series of iterative tests that are data-driven. So I think we've all heard how transformative personalization can be for digital marketing strategies. In fact, Evergage recently reported that 86% of marketers have seen a measurable lift in business results from their personalization campaigns. So it seems like kind of a no-brainer, right? So I'm sure that, during your 2020 marketing budget planning discussions, your executives or business stakeholders are like, yes, definitely, let's get this going. And you get approval to invest in some kind of personalization tool, and you get the tool, and then you get stuck. Either you have a hard time making sense of your data, maybe you feel like you can't access the right data, or maybe you have a hard time getting your team to decide and approve on a strategy even to start with. If you're feeling this way, you're in good company. This is very common. In fact, Dynamic Yield published a study saying that 61% of companies reported resources for personalization are limited or not available due to a lack of time or budget. So this is a common problem. But I'm here to tell you, you can unstick yourself by approaching your personalization strategy as a series of small iterative tests. This will enable you to grow your strategy. And by following an experimentation methodology, you can make sure your small tests make a real impact to the bottom line. So too often we see organizations either get paralyzed by these blockers I mentioned, or they attempt to kick off a personalization strategy with some complex customer interaction that's largely based on assumptions. And to avoid this problem, you can approach your strategy by backing it with data. So let's go through how to get something started when you don't have everything figured out yet. At a bare minimum, there are 4 things you need to get started to create a personalization pilot program. The first thing you need is access to your data. So one of the biggest challenges we find our clients have is their capability to see a clear and complete view of their customer lifecycle. Without this view into their customer behavior, it becomes hard to build any kind of data-driven strategy. Some of the problems are often data lives within many different systems and tools and owned by different departments or teams. These data silos are a blocker for seeing this customer lifecycle. And then in other cases, legacy systems have dirty data or inconsistent data, and this makes using it feel a little risky. So if you find yourself stalled with these data problems, you are certainly not alone, and ultimately you will need to fix some of these data challenges, but you don't have to be paralyzed by these challenges when it comes to getting a personalization strategy really started. At a minimum, everyone should be able to see some basic data in Google Analytics to get started, such as demographic data, device data, geographic data, and then some level of content engagement. So to get started, you will want to get familiar with the data that you do have. The second thing you absolutely must have, to state the obvious, is a personalization tool. And the rest of this webinar, I'm assuming that you already have invested in one, but if you haven't yet, there are a lot of tools out there, and it's important to invest in a tool that fits the requirements of your business. If you are working on choosing a personalization tool, there are resources on our website around requirements gathering and how to evaluate MarTech tools that could be really helpful for you. All right, so the third thing is executive buy-in. So here we're sort of assuming that your executive stakeholder is already bought in on personalization, but you want to make sure they support you to get the resources you need to actually implement and run a personalization program. This can include, in some cases, development help to configure your tools and data, content help to produce the messaging to test, and potentially design and UX resources as well. But you also want to sell the benefits of experimentation to your executive stakeholders, and they need to be on board with nurturing a culture of experimentation, which leads me to my last and most important thing that you will need, which is an experimentation mindset. And this is what we're really going to focus on here. So what do I mean by that? An experimentation mindset means you are comfortable with testing ideas with your digital audiences, and it means you are comfortable that your experiments may not successfully engage your audiences. So for some organizations, the idea of experimentation like this sounds risky, but we're actually seeing that organizations that embrace experimentation end up leading the market in customer experience. At phase 2, we treat any kind of optimization strategy as a data-driven experiment. So we start with a hypothesis informed by user behavior data and validated through testing to ensure we will improve the customer experience. So I want to talk a little bit more about the power of experimentation. And the idea is that the more you experiment, no matter the outcome, the more valuable information you are gathering. And you can use that data to further tweak and optimize your customer experience. I think probably some of you have heard of the term HIPPO. It stands for highest paid person's opinion. And nothing stalls innovation faster than deferring to a HIPPO's opinion instead of relying on data. So this is why an experimentation culture can be so valuable. Okay, so with these 4 things, executive buy-in, a personalization tool, access to customer behavior data, and of course, an experimentation mindset, you are ready to implement an impactful personalization strategy. So now let's take a look at the steps to putting together the strategy using an experimentation framework. So the first step is to determine what goal you will work to impact. Sometimes this actually can be the first blocker to getting a strategy going. In some cases, goals can be sort of politically charged. So the best way to combat this is by backing up your reasoning with data. And one way to prioritize goals is to create a goal tree like this. In this example, we've mapped some metrics that are critical to a company's success. At the top, we have a top-line goal of generating revenue, and each metric from there is broken down mathematically until you get down into focused objectives that your program can move the needle on through testing and personalization. So goal trees help you define which of the metrics within your business strategy can be optimized with personalization to give you the most impact. And aligning your strategy with the right goal is crucial to crafting the right experiment and making your strategy truly impactful. So this is a very simple example of an e-commerce business model. And if you look at this, I'm seeing that the checkout rate is only 15%. So maybe there's a way to personalize this part of the customer experience to improve that conversion rate. But I'm also seeing that the average order value is only $10. So maybe by delivering more personalized purchase recommendations, you can increase that average order value. And this metric is closer to your top line goal, to that revenue number. So this might indicate a more impactful metric to focus on. So you can use this. I encourage you to take a stab at mapping out your own business metrics to help identify which goal is going to be most impactful to your business. So the next step is to analyze your data. Already when you're evaluating that goal tree, you'll want to get into your data and start looking at your customer behavior to see what that current customer funnel looks like, how you might be able to optimize it. For a pilot program, you'll want to focus on the data you have. You may not have a full view of your complete customer lifecycle, and it's easy to get stuck here and feel sort of paralyzed by the feeling of insufficient data. But instead, try not to feel paralyzed and start looking at your audience behavior data that you can access, and start looking at specifically engagement behavior. So start by looking at basic patterns in your data. And even if you're feeling like your customer data is pretty opaque, you should be able to access some basic customer behavior points, which will start helping you understand how your audience is interacting with your site. So these are some examples of some basic data points that we should all be able to access via Google Analytics. And this will help really understand your user behavior. And when you're looking at your site behavior, focus on the bottom of the funnel conversion points. When we work with clients to get these strategies off the ground, generally we always recommend that they first channel efforts closest to those conversion points. And focusing on these conversion indicators will arm your pilot personalization program with some initial quick wins that affect the bottom line. So they really show the benefit of your personalization, which will end up helping boost confidence in your program within your organization and justify that marketing budget for it. And when you're starting to look at patterns in your data to form your audience segments, focus on influencing those in your audience who are exhibiting behavior that shows they are likely to convert. So maybe that looks like a certain amount of time on your site, or returning visitors, or maybe your audience has looked at a specific page that indicates they are ready to buy. These are the kind of indicators you're going to start segmenting your audience with. Okay, so the third step, and one of the most important steps to developing your strategy, is to formulate your hypothesis. So chances are by now you have a bunch of ideas about what you want to test, but you have to make sure you've got a valid test idea. So first, make sure your test will impact the goal you identified earlier. Again, making sure you're setting yourself up for implementing an impactful test. And now we're going to go through how to build an informed hypothesis. So first, you will need to clearly define the problem you are working to solve. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. So we'll go through an example here as I describe the hypothesis equation. In this example, we've looked at our user behavior data and noticed that mobile users abandon their shopping carts 60% more than desktop users. So we've got a problem defined. And the next step is to define a potential solution. This will be your personalization idea. So keep in mind, you can personalize the experience in a lot of different ways. You can test the design, some kind of functionality on your site, and of course, the messaging as well. For this example, our proposed solution is to add a call to action reminder for those mobile users to check out when they return to the site. All right, so the next part of the equation is to define your expected result. In this case, we expect to see an increase of completed purchases from the abandoned cart. And finally, your hypothesis will be a lot stronger if you have data to rationalize your expected result, such as click tracking data that suggests mobile users will take action at the top of the screen on return visits, where our CTA will go. So your hypothesis formula looks exactly like it did in 5th grade science class. If cause, then effect, because rationale. The cause is the solution, the effect is your expected results, and your rationale is your data backing up your idea. So it may feel silly to outline every personalization idea like this, but creating a repeatable process like this will help ensure you have a valid test, and it will help as you grow your personalization program in the future and you start inviting more of your organization to contribute ideas. So it is actually important. And then once you've got your hypothesis formulated, you want to formalize the metric you will measure. So when it comes to measuring your experiment, you want to make sure you're actually set up to track your success criteria and you know where to look in your data. If you've created your hypothesis the way I described, you shouldn't have a problem because you've already identified the data to back up your rationale. And that's where you'll look for your success criteria. For the example we've just discussed, you will want to measure the % increase of completed purchases for returning mobile visitors that had previously abandoned their cart. You may be able to measure this in your personalization tool, but you might want to make sure you can also measure it in Google Analytics to compare the data once your experiment is live. All right, so the next step is to create the test experience. So now that you've formulated your data-driven hypothesis, you have all the ingredients to build your experiment within your tool and create the personalized experience. So at this point, I would make sure you've planned timed for this part because it generally takes longer than we expect. New messaging that you might have to create takes time. design takes time and you want to provide time for that. And changing any functionality that may be part of your experiment may require developer time. So just keep that in mind as you're planning. And then you might be wondering, what kind of test do you need? We recommend with your pilot program that you stick with an A/B test. It's very common to want to test a bunch of different things and use a multivariate test, but we find that these tests welcome more opportunities to get false positives in your results because of there are more attributes at play. So stick with A/B tests, and you want to confirm that you have enough traffic to the area you want to personalize to produce a valid test. So in an ideal world, you would have statistically significant traffic for your test. And there are actually some great helpful calculators out there that you can Google to see if you will have enough traffic to make it statistically significant. But this may not be possible with your traffic flow, or you may not be able to justify the length of time it would take to get a statistically significant traffic flow. So in this case, you can plan to conduct your test over an average business cycle and just try your best to avoid variables like seasonality. All right, so QA and launch. At this point, you are ready to test and launch your personalization experiment. You definitely want to be diligent about testing to ensure you are delivering the experience you intend and to the right audience. Most personalization tools have preview functionality or some kind of testing built in. As a best practice, we like to do the testing on a dev or staging environment before we go live on the site. And then finally, make sure you've socialized your hypothesis and your plan here with your marketing team and anyone that has a work stream that intersects with the website. Just good practice to give them a heads up what you're doing. And after you've done your experiment, the next step of the process is to measure, report, document, and iterate. So this is a cyclical step, and you want to report on your findings no matter if you prove your hypothesis or not. It's important to remember here that any outcome of your personalization experiment will provide you with additional user behavior data, and you can take that data into consideration for your next test, your next iteration. There's also other things to measure, specifically operational success. So not only do you want to measure the success of your tests, but you also want to measure the efficiency of your test program. And this will give you additional metrics to report on to educate your organization about your experimentation process. And it will also create a benchmark with which to measure more of your program success. So for example, in addition to measuring your success metric that you defined earlier, you should start recording how long it takes to develop an experiment, this whole process we're going through, and see how long it takes to get live on the site. And then you can also measure how many tests you can pull off in a month and what the return on investment is. So these are other things that are great to report up to your business stakeholders. And so after measuring, you want to be sure to share those results. So at this point, you want to think of this as like an internal promotion for your personalization program. And whether your results were successful or not, sharing them within the context of your company's commitment to optimizing the customer experience will help your organization understand the value of your program and the value of you. And transparency is really important here, and reinforcing the value of personalization and optimization to your organization will help you to nurture a culture of experimentation and garner more support for your program. All right, so we've gotten to maturing your personalization program. So once you've got your pilot program off the ground and you're showing your stakeholders and organization at large how awesome you are and how impactful experimentation and personalization can be, you'll have the support to build and mature your program. So to do this, you may want to work on getting that complete view of your customer lifecycle by integrating more data sets and developing data dashboards to help make your data more actionable. So really getting a better understanding of what's going on with your customer behavior. You may consider getting a CDP, that stands for a customer data platform. And this is a tool that pulls your customer behavior data from all your different tools into one place to get that 360-degree view of your customer. So as you increase the volume of your experiments, you may want to get more help to build the experiments and get ideas from across the organization on different ways to optimize the customer experience. And at this point, you may also want to integrate more channels into your personalization strategy. So you could start to create a cross-channel experience with this personalization. And with this pilot program that you've developed, you'll have the executive support to invest in additional tooling and staff to do that. So that would be the promised land right there. So hopefully you are feeling that a personalization program is in reach at this point with the pilot program that I've outlined. And you know how to use an experimentation mindset to mobilize a strategy to help you get started. As an added bonus, you also have the tools to become a change agent in your organization to nurture the practice of using experimentation to guide and validate strategic decision making. So with that, I wanted to thank you all for attending, and we'll open it up for a few questions.
Thank you, Annie. Like Annie just said, we are opening up for questions, so feel free to send them our way using the Q&A function in Zoom webinar. A few we have already queued up for you, Annie. The first question comes from Tom, and he says, what's the biggest mistake you see enterprise organizations making today when launching a personalization program?
Okay, thanks, Tom, for the question. The biggest mistake. Well, I see a lot of pressure on marketing departments to do something like radical with their personalization. So it seems like just to justify the cost of the tool, they come out the gate with something really complex. And I don't see complexity making any strategy particularly successful. So I guess that would be the biggest mistake I see. Like, don't bite off more than you can chew, as I think I mentioned earlier, and sort of build on your strategy with these iterative tests I was talking about. That's what I'm thinking around the biggest mistake.
Thank you, Annie. Our next question, it comes from Kayla, and she asks, when working at a nonprofit instead of a private sector organization, should our approach to personalization change? If so, what are some of the biggest differences we should keep in mind?
Good question, Kayla. Yeah, so the methodology I've been talking about actually should work no matter your business model. But your goal tree would obviously look different than the e-commerce example I had. So I think the key would be establishing what organization goal you want to impact. So for a nonprofit, that could be something around fundraising, but it could also be something different. So there's a lot of options there, but the methodology should be the same. And even if you're not focusing on revenue, your goal for your personalization strategy should still be data-driven to really drive impact.
Thanks, Annie. Our next question comes from Brendan, and he'd like to know, can you talk a little more about how to get that complete view of the customer lifecycle you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. Thanks, Brendan, for the question. Yeah, so most companies, unless they've put a lot of work into this, will have this challenge of seeing that complete customer lifecycle. And when we're working with clients to help them with this, we usually start with doing some kind of MarTech audit to really understand the tools and systems that are bringing in that data and what kind of data they're collecting. And then from there, we would identify gaps and maybe data overlaps with different tools. And then we'd figure out if there are additional tools that the organization might need to collect any data gaps there. And then from there, we might look at if you can make an existing tool sort of a central hub for that customer data. So in some cases, an organization can use like an existing CRM like Salesforce to be that central hub of information. But for larger organizations, they'll probably need a CDP, like I was mentioning before. So just to create that central hub of data on the customer. And I actually think we have some resources on our website we can send you if you're interested in learning more, Brendan.
Thanks, Annie. Our next question comes from Jessica. She asks, our team is struggling to make a decision on what personalization tool to buy. How do you recommend we evaluate tools?
Yeah, that's a great question too, Jessica. Thanks. So I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but when you're evaluating, you really need to make sure the tool is going to work with your business requirements. So some things to think about would be like, what other MarTech tools will it need to integrate with? So another thing is like, is there an existing API for those integrations? Another thing to ask would be, who do you have resourced to use the tool? Will you need developers to configure this new tool? So these are some of the questions you want to ask within your organization and also to the various tools that you're evaluating. And then another helpful thing that we recommend with our clients is to write up some use cases for how you would like to use the tool, and use those to discuss whenever you're in those demos with whatever the tool vendor, and they start with their demo script. It's kind of a good way to break out of that demo script and have like a real conversation with that person around your specific business needs. So use those use cases to get more specific during those demos.
Great, thank you, Annie. So that is all of our questions for today. On behalf of Annie and our team here at Phase 2, thank you for joining us. If you would like to reach out to Annie or our optimization and insights team offline, please feel free to reach out via marketing@phase2technology.com. We'll, of course, also be following up with the recording of today's webinar for easy sharing and on-demand access. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day, everybody.
All right, thanks again.